Carmine, you should take over his chair. Get it going.
Any of them.
Make some friends out.
By population or residents.
Right, yeah.
Are you going to but not all of us. It's off. Your cell phone. Yeah, the ringer's off my cell phone. I can try checking in your electronic.
Oh.
I'm going to try to find it with my cell phone.
Right here. That's Leo.
But no, that's exactly. Yeah, I know. Exactly. Like it's like walking the house.
It's occupied, but it's just well,
What did you say? Rude. Well, sometimes I think got it. Resist the open space.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Joint Committee on Housing, public hearing. I'm Senator Bill Monfort, Senate Chair of the committee. I'm joined to my left by Representative Bonin, who is the House Chair. Today we'll be hearing bills and testimony related to 40B and other miscellaneous bills. I want to introduce some other members who are with us today. To my right, to your left, they're calling the bills to the road, Representative. Thank you for being here. Christine Barber. Thank you for being here. Representative Carmine Gentile. Being here. We have Representative Jeff Deal this morning. We have Representative David DeCoste. Representative Michael Conley. And Vice Chair Joan Lott. Thank you for being here, Representative.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning. So again, we're here to really the 40Bs, the other miscellaneous bills. If you're here to testify and have not already registered, please do so by filling out a sign-in sheet located outside the room. Today we will be hearing testimony in order in the way that people signed up. We ask you to limit your testimony to 3 minutes. The committee, as always, welcomes written testimony, which you can leave with staff at the end of the table. And I promise you, we do read all of that testimony. These TVs in front of me, behind me, will display the names of the current person testifying, and it's customary for this committee to recognize elected and appointed officials at the beginning of the hearing. So we will start off with Representative Dooley and his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Both chairmen and members of the committee. I'll go last, but I just wanted to introduce my panel first. Rich McCarthy is the town planner for the town of Norfolk, and Sue Jacobson is head of affordable housing for the town of Norfolk. So, Sue, if you want to go first.
Sure. First, thank you, Representative Dooley, for bringing this bill forward and for letting us come in this morning and speak to this bill and a little bit about affordable housing. Representative Dooley has introduced this workforce housing bill that I think would allow a large number of people that currently are not able to enter our affordable housing lotteries, and those would be our teachers and our firefighters and our police officers, because their incomes are over and above what is allowed currently with 40Bs. Secondly, I think that, and I see many bills that are going to be heard here this morning, that really we need to look at the affordable housing percentage overall to try to make it fair and equitable. You know, we in the town of Norfolk are required to have 10% of affordable housing, as is the city of Boston. Our percentages are exactly the same. I think it's much more difficult for a community of 10,000 people, 3,000 and some odd homes, to reach that goal than it is for a city to reach that goal with much larger number of homes and residents. And third, I think we need to take a hard look at what affordable housing and 40B developments does to our school systems, to our public safety, and to our water resources. We have a regional middle and high school, and not only is Norfolk have currently, I believe, 6 40Bs that will be coming before them, our bordering town of Rentham and Plainville have also had significant numbers of 40Bs. So the increase in our school systems is not just one town, it's 3 towns. And last, I think that 40B was initially put together to help provide affordable housing in communities where it was needed, and certainly I have the greatest job in the world as an affordable housing director and placing people into homes that otherwise would never have them. But I'm seeing in our community and other communities, instead of people coming together and working together, it's dividing the residents from the town officials, and at this level as well. It's dividing the communities, and they're not working together to make it happen because they don't feel like their voices can be heard, and they don't understand why the towns are not able to make some changes, and maybe not take all of them and take some of them. And they just find in our particular town that we're being really hit hard with I said 6, it may be 7.
7, yeah.
7 40Bs that are in our pipeline right now. So thank you for letting me speak.
Good timing.
It's easy when there's a clock right there.
I was just going to add a few other points relative to the pending bill.
Who's that name?
Richard McCarthy, town planner, town of Norfolk. As a planner, one of our responsibilities is to take a look at housing, but also economic development. And I think one of the things that with this potential bill I think is important is workforce housing. And I think that having been at this planning for quite some time, the folks that are in need of help really aren't covered right now. Some of the workforce housing people who could benefit from inclusion in this bill. And also, as you look at the Community Preservation Act, I think one of the things that it does allow for communities to look at housing beyond the 80% low amount income, but yet at the same time, the system in place today is not set up to provide more incentives for towns to be able to take advantage for people beyond 80% median income. So I think, this would certainly help in that area, which I think, again, would be a benefit to not only the community, but affordable housing in general. And the last point I would like to bring up is that, at the same time, well, as you know, in Massachusetts, we're the opportunity to kind of plan and plan for your community on a local level is paramount to our structure of how we govern. But yet, it's hard for lay people to understand that you're talking about a state law relative to 40 housing, which no one debates the merits of it. But those things don't meld well with lay people. And I think if there is some amendments that could come to help scale things appropriately. In Norfolk, there's 40B projects, as we're discussing those ones, but quite honestly, they're not in character with some of the neighborhoods. So one perhaps would question, how they'll be able to fit once they're there within the community as well. And there's really not much that's not taken into account right now in the present system. And I think that's something that we need to look closely at. I think that some of the existing, again, another point that, as you well know, the incentive is based on apartments, and nobody would agree or disagree that necessity for apartments, but not all communities are set up to handle and accommodate some of the needs for apartments necessarily right up. So it's kind of like a disconnect. You place apartment projects where services aren't available to those people. So those kind of secondary things need to be more accounted in going forward with 40B. So hopefully you take consideration to make some significant change to help the community. Thank you.
And I'll just there we go. Good, boy, two for two. The bill we're speaking on is 3010, and I'm a little bit biased from the standpoint of as being a firefighter. I've had the impetus of this bill was a lot of my fellow firefighters and police officers came to me and said, listen, all this stuff going on with 40B and all these affordable housing is great, but we don't qualify. We make a little bit too much, but we don't make enough to live in these towns. So I represent 6 towns. We found this to be a problem in all the towns. Is that we're granted relatively affluent suburbs, and so what we're finding is that our teachers, our firefighters, our police officers, and that segment of society that is above the affordable housing threshold, but below what can afford to just regularly buy in these communities, because developers are building more and more expensive houses, and it's becoming, and it's actually pricing them out. There really was a disconnect. So Secretary Ash and I worked on this bill together. We came up with this idea. What it basically does is it puts a second tier onto the affordable housing. It allows for people that make a little bit more to be able to be part of it. And it also doesn't incentivize the towns to take away the actual affordable. We don't want to take away people that are needing to be serviced by this. So for every affordable house, for every workforce house, it counts as 0.5. So 2 units of workforce housing equal 1 unit of affordable housing. And we also in this bill capped it at 25%. So the most the community could have going toward their 10% of workforce housing. So I don't want it to be, all right, well now the communities are going to come in and make it all workforce housing and knock out the affordable housing altogether, is we capped it at 25%. So 25% of the 10%, so, that's the maximum that they can use toward workforce housing. So that's what the concept is. And it's, happy to discuss this and happy to tweak it, however we tweak the numbers, but we're really seeing, especially out in our suburbs, a big disconnect for people who work and serve the communities and aren't being able to afford this. We have firefighters that are having to drive 45 minutes, to live in towns that are 45 minutes away. It hurts our response time as well from the standpoint of we're small units. Most of our departments are a combination of permanent and call. And so whenever we have, if there's only 3 people on a shift, if there's something going on, we have to rely on the call firefighters and also the permanent firefighters coming back. People that are coming in from 45 minutes away, they can't come back for a medical or for a fire. So being able to have more of these people in the communities, same with the teachers, having the teachers in the communities, being there, able to be after school, and being able to just be part of the community makes for a better society and a better town. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee, the panel? Hearing none, thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Next we will hear from Representative Hannah Kane and Senator Mike Moore. And any panel members that want to report.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Joint Committee. I'm joined today by Representative Hannah Kane of the 11th Worcester District, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen John LeBeau of the Shrewsbury Board of Selectmen, and the Shrewsbury Assistant Town Manager and Economic Development Coordinator. We are testifying in support of Senate Bill 731, which is an act relative to affordable housing in the town of Shrewsbury. This legislation is a home rule petition filed pursuant to a vote taken by the Shrewsbury Town Meeting members on February 25th, 2015. As you are already well aware, the Massachusetts Comprehensive Permit Act, also known as Chapter 40B, encourages the production of affordable housing in all communities throughout the Commonwealth. However, the law does not take into consideration certain types of housing that may already provide affordable options to residents of the community. This bill would simply amend the existing law to enable the town of Shrewsbury to classify manufactured or mobile homes as affordable housing for 40B purposes. Manufactured homes truly offer affordable housing opportunities for many of our constituents. As such, we respectfully request that the committee update the existing Chapter 40B provisions to reflect this classification for the town of Shrewsbury. Representative Kane and I have also submitted written testimony to the committee requesting a favorable report of Senate Bill 731. I'll now like to turn it over to my panelists and Representative Hannah Kane. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for having us here today. I think that my Senate counterpart spoke very well on our belief on this, and I want to speak for a minute, actually not as a state legislator, but as a town meeting member for 15 years and as a finance committee member, and just say that this is something in our community that we feel very strongly should be recognized towards counting towards our 10% affordable mandatory requirement, and that manufactured homes are a home of choice for many of our residents, and that we do feel it should be acknowledged and constituted as such within the confines of 40B. I'd like to turn it over to our chairman of our Board of Selectmen, John LeBeau, for further comment.
Thank you, Rep. Kane. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is John LeBeau, Chairman of the Shrewsbury Board of Selectmen. As I've dealt with several of you in an entirely different context than you may be trying to place me, my day job is Commissioner of the Department of Agricultural Resources. But I'm here as Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and we seek your support of Senate Bill 731. This petition has twice been previously approved by committee, but a new authorization is required in this current session. Shrewsbury is a municipality that allows for all types of housing by right from small single-family homes, garden-style apartments, duplexes, townhouses, and larger style single-family homes. We are a low-barrier community. We have an inclusionary zoning component in our zoning bylaw, mandating that a new development of 5 or more lots needs to have an affordable component. We do have in Shrewsbury 40 manufactured homes that have been in existence since before 1976, and they have provided a truly affordable housing option in the town for more than 50 years. Manufactured homes within the town provide a safe, affordable housing option to many individuals and families. Given that these manufactured homes truly are affordable to many of our residents, we respectfully request that your committee approve our petition to revise the existing 40B criteria and reflect this classification for the town of Shrewsbury, and we will provide written testimony there too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. My name is Kristen Last, the Assistant Town Manager and the Economic Development Coordinator with the Town of Shrewsbury. Just wanted to recognize that I was here with Senator Moore and Rep. Kane and another member of our Board of Selectmen testifying last February on the similar type of bill. So we just thank you for your time, and we will be submitting written testimony for your review and consideration. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee for the panel?
Senator, I have no questions. I just would comment. I support this bill 100%. I support the extension to every community in the state. Mr. Chairman, you and I have spoken about this. Given the recent study by the Department of Revenue, it's clear that the vast majority of folks living in these communities, manufactured, fall under the category of folks who fall within the affordable income and provided and sent over to you. The bottom line is most of the people who live in these communities already qualify into any other affordable housing, and we're just not getting an honest count. When we look at Shrewsbury or any other community with a large number, in my case, in Rockland, with hundreds of units not counted, and we're not getting an honest count when we talk about affordable housing unless we count manufactured units. Thank you.
Any further questions? Hearing none, thank you all
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have been doing our Representative Track Tyler. Next, we'll take the testimony of Representative Wendy Yarrow. And Representative Martin, you want to
Join him, you want to sit next to him, or you want to stand and wait?
I'll wait.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the members of the committee. I appreciate you taking me out of order. Here to talk about Bill 3013. It's a bill that deals with fraudulently withholding excessive profits through 40B projects. Now, as you've heard from testimony, 40B can be very disruptive, especially in a small town. It can cause expenses to go up by requiring cities and towns to hire more police officers, build more schools. And 40B has a provision to help deal with that by requiring excess profits to be paid to the city or town. So if you own an apartment complex, profits over 10%, for example, are supposed to go to the city or town. What we're finding out is that this is often not happening. Developers will often run expenses from another company through the 40B project to make the profits appear lower than they are. This is depriving our cities and towns of payments that they're rightfully owed. All you have to do is Google the words 40B fraud to come up with dozens of examples of this happening. You'll see quotes from our previous Inspector General, Greg Sullivan, who found that our cities and towns are being deprived of millions of dollars a year because of this. So what this bill would do, it would basically requires the developer or the landlord to pay these excessive profits that they agreed to from the beginning. That has always been a requirement of 40B. And so if they're found guilty of fraudulently withholding these profits, that developer shall be ineligible to construct any additional developments under Chapter 40B or 40R for a period of 5 years, which I think is quite a fair way to handle this. This is happening at a time when developers and landlords are making record profits in our current housing market. It's also happening at a time where tax revenues have not been going up at a commensurate level. Hence, we're not able to give as much local aid as we want This would help address that by requiring developers and landlords to pay the excessive profit payments that they agreed to do from the beginning. It's something that's been tried in the past before, and it's my sincere hope that the committee votes on this favorably. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions or comments for the representative in the committee? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next word from Representative Brian Meyer.
Mr. Chairman, good morning. Thank you. Happy holidays to committee members. I'll be brief. This is Bill number 3493, and what this looks to do is to change the definition under Chapter 40B, Section 20, of what is low and moderate income housing. Right now, if you look at it, it's based only on housing that is subsidized, either federal or state, in some manner. This bill would look to increase that definition so that also any single-family dwelling or condominium which has an assessed value of $200,000 or less would be part of that definitional statement in terms of what low-income housing is. And if I use my own community as Milford as an example, I think you can see that we're not getting an accurate count of what really is affordable and what is not affordable. So just some rough numbers. In the town of Milford, we have slightly over 11,000 dwelling units. That would require about 1,100 so that a community could avoid the local zoning overrides of Chapter 40B, which can be onerous on small communities. Milford has about 700 existing affordable units as per the subsidized definition which exists in the law today, meaning we need about 400 or so to be able to withstand a 40B development. However, the town of Milford has about 300 single-family dwellings valued under $200,000 or less, and we have over 700 condominium units that are valued under $200,000 for a total of about 1,000, and it gives us 600 over what would be required under the law. So it really goes to, I think, trying to capture what exactly is affordable and what's not affordable. The mere fact that these units aren't subsidized does not mean that folks who would qualify income-wise for affordable housing would not be able to live in these units, and we do. And I think the way the law is right now, it by not getting an accurate count of what is affordable, these 40B projects get steered to communities that have lower infrastructure costs, place like my community of Milford, as opposed to other communities that really need the affordable housing. So that's what this bill would seek to do. I appreciate your time. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
Thank you so much. It would be helpful for my thinking, and I'm admittedly no expert whatsoever in this particular bit of the law. If you have data that you could get for your community on the income levels of people that are living in these units that you would propose to, not sort of examples, but statistics, what percent are in different areas, and what the area median income is, so I can sort of compare as compared to what is currently found, at least it would help in my looking at it.
Yeah, I think you'll find that the area median income in my town of Milford is a little over $60,000 per year. So that's the demographic of the community that you're looking at. You know, we really have, in real terms, an affordable basis right now, and yet we continue to get hit with affordable housing projects because we have good infrastructure, we have sewer, we have a good solid school system. There are very appealing elements to our town for a developer to come to, where we really, I think, are doing more than what other communities are doing in terms of making affordable housing accessible.
Yes, that's something.
Okay.
Any further questions, comments?
Thank you very much.
Next we'll hear from Scott Eagler, the Executive Director of Massachusetts Housing Partnership.
Thanks, Chairman Boncory, Chairman Hona, members of the committee. I'm Clark Ziegler, Executive Director of the Massachusetts Housing Partnership. I've submitted written testimony, and we're all intimidated by your buzzer, so I'll try to summarize from that. I think most of you are familiar with MHP and what we do. We were created to work with cities and towns to help them increase their supply of affordable housing. We've worked all over the state. We've worked with almost every city and town in the Commonwealth at one time or another. We also provide professional consulting support to local zoning boards of appeal, reviewing 40B projects, and to date we have helped 205 cities and towns review 322 applications for comprehensive permits. There are really just 3 points I'd like to make today about the legislation before you and in general about efforts to amend Chapter 40B. First is that the need for a zoning mechanism like Chapter 40B is greater than ever, and this is not news to the committee. We've had the highest increase in home prices of any state in the Union since 1980. We now have Metro Boston now has the 4th highest rents in the country after San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles. And we are basically bleeding talent to other parts of the country. Of the 20 metro areas that we compete with most closely for innovation jobs, we rank 16th on housing production, and we have been consistently losing talent through domestic outmigration. So there's a very serious problem and a real need for a zoning mechanism that allows us to produce more housing. The second point I want to make is that Chapter 40B works as it was intended. Most communities have figured out how the law works. Most comprehensive permit decisions are handled at the local level without any need for appeals. In the most recent subsidized housing inventory, an additional 19 communities achieved 10% of their housing stock as affordable housing. It's up to 67 cities and towns. So the law, communities have figured out how the law works and have made it work, and it is achieving the purpose it was intended to. I should also point out that a lot of the criticism you may hear about 40B really relates to practices and to problems that occurred many, many years ago that have since been addressed through reform of state policy. And there have been a number of reforms adopted administratively at the state level that have really addressed those local concerns, including deferring to local zoning that provides a reasonable alternative to Chapter 40B, counting housing developed through through local initiatives, not through conventional federal and state subsidy programs, very rigorous design review before projects are submitted to local zoning boards of appeals. There have been a number of situations where communities have spoken up, where legitimate concerns have been raised, and where state policy has been reformed to address those concerns and make sure the law works well. My final point is that the controversy around Chapter 40B is really not about affordable housing per se, but it really is a reflection of the nearly complete failure of our state zoning and planning laws. I'll talk really fast. The Joint Committee has acted on this legislation reported by the committee in July and also approved in the last legislative session would directly address the need for additional housing production in the Commonwealth. And just last week, Governor Baker introduced new legislation called Housing Choice legislation that would reduce the margin of vote for 8 best practices that promote housing production and smart growth from 2/3 to a simple majority. Those are the kind of solutions that we really need in Massachusetts to address our housing situation. And I would urge you to reject proposals to amend 40B, to work to advance the committee's own bill through the House and Senate, and to hold a hearing and favorably recommend the governor's bill as soon as possible in 2018. Thank you very much for your consideration. I'm sorry to run over, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from the committee? Statements from the committee?
Mr. Ziegler, could you speak specifically to any opinions you have regarding the myriad of proposals here to include manufactured housing communities in account?
I understand why communities that have a larger number of mobile homes and manufactured housing have that concern. I would point out that if we simply count housing now against the 10%, that does nothing to add housing supply in the Commonwealth. The situation we have now, every city and town can do more to produce housing at all income levels, private sector housing production. Simply counting differently for 40B purposes doesn't do anything to make our housing situation any better. So I guess I would argue that We need every tool available to produce more housing. And I understand where the sentiment comes from, but we need to solve our supply problem.
You think the affordable versus unaffordable housing counts is correct without counting manufactured homes?
I think the law is very clear that any, and it has been for some time, any manufactured home that is restricted to occupancy by a low moderate income household has always counted. That's never been the issue. I think the issue is whether any housing, any private housing that's affordable today but might not be affordable tomorrow. My family home, my parents bought for 20 grand. I can tell you it's worth a lot more than that now. Things change, and simply because something is affordable today does not mean it'll be affordable in 5 or 10 years.
So what would your guess be within any given affordable housing community here, manufactured homes, or within housing Boston? What would your guess be in terms of the occupancy of those homes falling under the criteria of affordable?
My guess, without having looked at the data, is that I suspect that a large percentage of folks occupying those units would qualify as lower moderate income households. I don't think there's a whole lot of doubt about that.
Did you see the DOR report?
I'm sorry?
Have you seen the DOR report?
I have not, and I would love to see. If you'd share it with me, I would love to see it.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Next, we'll have a Santa Chapa with the Executive Director, Rachel Heller, and the Board President, Son Lisa.
Thank you, Chairman Honan, Chairman Vormkore, and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify today in support of our affordable housing law, Chapter 40B. My name is Soni Gupta. I'm the Executive Director of Home Funders, and I'm here today as the Board President for Citizens Housing and Planning Association, which you know as CHAPA. I'm here to ask the committee to protect and preserve Chapter 40B as an important resource for creating affordable housing in Massachusetts. CHAPA's mission is to encourage the production and preservation of housing that's affordable to low and moderate income households, and to foster diverse and sustainable communities through planning and development. Our thousands of members across Massachusetts represent a broad range of affordable housing stakeholders, and they work together to make sure that every family and household in Massachusetts has a place to call home that's safe, affordable, and healthy. In Massachusetts, there's no tool that's more effective in achieving our mission than Chapter 40B. It's no surprise that we have a housing crisis in our state. Our housing costs are high and continue to rise as the supply of new housing doesn't keep up with demand. This shortage of housing is placing a burden on all households in Massachusetts, but particularly on low and moderate income households who struggle to pay rents and mortgages. Restrictive zoning practices, including large lot zoning and the prohibition of multifamily housing, are still widespread and have greatly contributed to these high housing costs and low levels of housing production and increased sprawl. Chapter 40B was enacted to address these local zoning and land use restrictions that make it impossible to build affordable housing under existing local zoning. The legislation codified the goal of ensuring that every community does its part to meet the housing needs of its residents and also of the region. It's a critical piece of the puzzle for providing and protecting affordable housing, along with Chapter 40T, Chapter 40R, and many other initiatives that this committee has spearheaded. In addition to creating much-needed housing, Chapter 40B helps communities meet their fair housing regulations, encourages communities to proactively plan for growth, and supports economic development. Since its creation in 1969, Chapter 40B has created over 70,000 homes, new homes for seniors, working families, and people with disabilities. Over half of these have been dedicated to low and moderate income households. Nearly 50,000 of these have been rental homes, and 20,000 have provided homeownership opportunities. In recent years, Chapter 40B has continued to help all communities meet our housing needs. There are currently 65 communities that have more than 10% of their housing on the subsidized housing inventory, and this is up from 48 communities just 3 years ago. 7 more cities and towns are appeal-proof because of progress they've made on their housing production goals. And since 2014, Chapter 40B has created over 1,100 new affordable homes. Most importantly, Nearly 80% of all new housing outside of cities is a direct result of Chapter 40B. In order to continue this progress, we need to protect 40B and ensure that it continues to remain a strong tool for meeting our housing needs. I turn it over to Rachel Heller, CEO of CHAPA.
Good morning. I will do my best to beat the buzzer. Okay, so again, as Sony testified, our affordable housing law helps communities to meet their fair housing obligations, encourages communities to proactively plan for growth, and supports economic development. The Affordable Housing Law helps communities meet their fair housing obligations under state and federal law and to be more welcoming to people of different income levels. First, there's a duty not to discriminate through policies that have a disparate impact on protected classes. Second, communities have an obligation to affirmatively further fair housing and to ensure that they have plans and people are aware throughout the state that there are opportunities to live in their community. Chapter 40B helps cities and towns avoid creating disparate impacts on protected classes by overcoming the exclusionary zoning policies that have led to a lot of our high housing costs. It's also, though it's not seen this way, Chapter 40B is actually a tool, and it's a tool for planning. It gives communities a tool that really helps communities to control development rather than having development happen to them. We all need to create more housing. 40B provides that opportunity to say where that housing will be created, and if you do that, you then have the ability to say no to the kinds of developments that you don't want in your community. And this has actually been shown to work in practice. In North Reading, Mass Housing rejected a 40B development where the town had proactively zoned and built affordable housing through Chapter 40R. Developers know that the comprehensive permit is not the right option for towns that have made other options available for developing the kind of homes that we need in the state. However, if a community has not done the proper planning and zoning and allowed for development, that's where the law really does provide that remedy, and it is an effective remedy in that we are able to produce more of the housing, and that's why one of the reasons why Chapter 40B has been really the primary tool for development. Also, as Sony said, Chapter 40B really serves as an economic development engine. We know that we have a housing shortage that is impacting our ability to grow. And MAPC, as you all know, they're here constantly saying how much housing we need. We have a huge housing shortage. 17,000 homes a year are needed. We're not meeting those numbers. We've definitely seen an uptick in the last few years, but we're still falling short of the 17,000 homes that are needed. We need to make sure, as previous people said, that workers can live in the communities where they work. That is incredibly important. That comes because of Chapter 40B and also really proactive zoning on the part of communities. As Tony mentioned, 80% of all of the housing that's been built outside of our major cities is really because of Chapter 40B. So along with the billions of dollars in construction activity and state and local taxes that 40B has generated, our affordable housing law continues to be this important economic engine. It's also important to recognize that Chapter 40B cannot do it alone. I think there is a lot of anger, I'll hurry up, towards Chapter 40B sometimes because it's really become the only way to develop housing in a lot of communities. And so, we have a lot of other wonderful laws and programs in the state. We have Chapter 40R. We have bond programs. Thank you for moving the bond bill out of the Housing Committee. And we have a lot of local resources like CPA. It's really a combination of all of these things and more. And that's why we're very appreciative that the Housing Committee has also reported out our housing production bill, which would require multifamily zoning in every community because we think that's an important tool as well. So I will wrap up by saying that Chapter 40B has withstood the test of time. It has responded, as Clark said, to the challenges that communities face, and DHCD has issued guidelines and regulations to really help communities meet their 10% while also growing our affordable housing stock. I do want to respond quickly to the comment about manufactured housing, and maybe if you asked me the question, then it wouldn't eat into my time. Are we okay if I go over?
I'll ask you the question afterwards.
Okay. Well, I was just going to respond to the question you asked Clark, and I think Clark was right on in saying that we need more homes, and we can try to count everything that exists, but it won't get us to where we need to be. In addition to that, as Clark mentioned, it can count, it's just tricky, and the reason why is there are 3 basic criteria that all homes need to meet in order to qualify for 40B. They need to be deed restricted, and that's where I think the biggest challenge is with manufactured housing, because what are you deed restricting the property, the actual unit? That's a challenge. That you can't overcome it, but that's a challenge. Also, it needs to be affordable to households at or below 80% of area median income. And these households are certified. So we know that the people that are living in affordable rentals are eligible to live in that housing. And there needs to be an affirmative fair housing marketing plan. So that's a really critical piece where we're letting people know about these opportunities so that the communities can be more welcoming, which really is the purpose of Chapter 40B. So thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee, to the panel?
Real briefly, on occasion, some of my colleagues were having issues with 40B developments in their community talk, and they asked, what else can we do? One of the things, obviously, is 40R, and 40R empowers local municipalities to designate certain areas that they might want to grow in. But yet, some of my colleagues are not familiar with 40R. How are we marketing that at CHAPA, at National Municipal, Massey? Because I do find that not enough people know about 40R. What do you think about that, Richard?
We can always do more to get out information about the tools that the Commonwealth has. And CHAPA is about to come out with a report in the next couple of months about Chapter 40R. It looks at what has actually been accomplished, where communities have had trouble using it, why they may have had trouble adopting it as well. So hopefully, and out of that will come some policy recommendations that can also be helpful. I think Mass Housing Partnership does a good job of getting out to communities to let them know that it exists, but we all need to help with that, so we will certainly do more. When we do release our report, we are planning to have a forum that will hopefully also help to get out the word more about, the program.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments?
Thank you.
Next call, let's hear from again, nonprofit developers, including David Ryan, Director of Advocacy for MOV050, Andrew Fonlin, Executive Director of Highway Community Partners, as well as Andrew Fulford, the Chief of Staff and Preservation of Vermont.
Chairman Boncory, Chairman Honan, members of the committee, my name is David Bryant. I am the Director of Advocacy for the Massachusetts Association of Community Development Corporations, MACDC. On behalf of our member organizations, I'm testifying to the importance of the Comprehensive Permit Law, also known as Chapter 40B, or the Affordable Housing Law, to expanding affordable housing options for Massachusetts residents. The Affordable Housing Law was enacted to address local zoning and land use restrictions that make it impossible or economically infeasible to build affordable housing under existing local zoning. The legislation codified the goal of ensuring that each community in the Commonwealth does its fair share to meet the housing needs of its residents. In 2016 alone, our members served 81,219 families with housing, jobs, and other educational, counseling, technical assistance, and housing-related services. CDC's built or preserved 1,643 homes and provided 1,438 jobs to local workers in real estate construction projects, representing 34 projects and a $186 million investment. While many MACD members have a pipeline of projects in the greater Boston area, moving these projects forward takes a very long time and it is very expensive, especially for smaller nonprofit developers. Housing development in suburban communities is particularly challenging for many reasons, including the high cost of development, restrictive local zoning ordinances, opposition to and delays in reviewing projects, and moratoriums on multifamily housing. Chapter 40B is an important tool for overcoming disparate impact policies and for affirmatively furthering fair housing by overcoming exclusionary zoning practices that drive up housing costs, limit the rental housing supply, favor age-restricted housing over housing for families with children, and limit the supply of accessible housing. Chapter 40B has been an important producer of housing that expands options for low and moderate income families. Early in this legislative session, MACDC testified in support of several bills that would spur greater housing production and legislation to overhaul and update our state's dated and confusing planning and zoning laws. Our members understand the challenges presented by our local zoning laws, and we believe additional tools and more flexible practices will allow us to do more of these projects with greater efficiency. Currently, our regional housing supply does not meet the demand, and there is no clear sign that enough towns are modifying local zoning to permit multifamily housing and to allow the more sustainable rental options that working families and seniors need. In the absence of such reforms, the comprehensive permit remains an essential tool to provide the flexible zoning necessary to build multifamily housing that is affordable and for diversifying our community's housing choices. Nailed it.
Good morning, Chairman Boncory, Chairman Honan, members of the committee. Thank you for having us today. My name is Andrew DeFranza. I'm the Executive Director of Harbor Light Community Partners. We're a local nonprofit CDC. We work north of Boston, affiliated with MACDC and with CHAPA. We're a mission-based developer, and I'm here today to support 40B, and I ask you to do the same. We work currently in 9 communities north of Boston, and we house a little over 500 people, workers, retirees, people with disabilities, many of whom woke up in homes this morning that would not have been there without 40B. And I'd be delighted to take you to any of those sites if you're curious about coming to visit them. We're affiliated with a number of historic 40B projects, and with 2 currently that we're working on. The largest project that was 40B related is 110 units. The smallest project we've been involved with is 4. I would recommend, unless you have a very significant appetite for pain, that you do not do a 4-unit 40B project. It's not a great plan. But there are 4 reasons why we think 40B is critical that I'd like to share with you based on our experience in a set of communities, most of which are suburban and a number of which are very affluent. The first one is zoning exclusion. If we want to be able to respond to race and class segregation that's economically and ethically problematic, and which is largely caused by our zoning patterns in the state, 40B is currently our best tool to address that. Second, regional equity. This is about everybody doing their part and providing different kinds of housing at different levels. We find a number of communities with their zoning laws create intentional or unintentional sets of exclusion when we're in communities where they're supportive. 2 weeks ago, I was in Beverly, where I live, and the City Council supported a 40R district, 9-0, which was amazing. Thank you to the City of Beverly. And one of the comments that came from the City Council was, we're doing our part, we're already over 10%, what about our neighbors? Because they have a number of neighboring communities that are well below 10% that are actively resisting or doing nothing. And so this is a question of regional equity. Third is a question of volume, which Clark and Rachel spoke to, which is if we want to house our workforce, our retirees, people who built communities who want to stay there, people who are building them now who want to be there, we need more housing units. This is related to the data from our friends at MAPC and MHP, and 40B is one of the best ways we can get more units. Fourth and finally, and this is a little bit of a curveball, I think, is politics. We see consistently that often local officials in communities may want to do the right thing, but there are political costs to pay if they support a 40R district or if they support anything that has to be taken at town meeting floor. And often in quiet, I will hear that there's a preference when I say, how about we do a 40R? Someone will say, no, we would rather you did a 40B for various political reasons, and that's what we'll do. Even in Hamilton right now, we're working on a project where the neighbors asked us to do a friendly 40B because they knew that the project could be smaller with a 40B than it could be under existing zoning. So there are political reasons occasionally why it's supportive. Thank you for supporting 40B.
Good morning, Chairman Boncory, Chairman Honan, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning about the Affordable Housing Law, Chapter 40B. My name is Andrew Spofford. I'm speaking on behalf of Preservation of Affordable Housing. We're a national nonprofit housing developer and owner based in Boston. We have built or preserved about 9,000 apartments nationally. Of those, about 3,000 apartments affordable to low and moderate income families and seniors in Massachusetts and 19 cities and towns across the Commonwealth. I'm here to testify in support of the importance of 40B as a tool for doing the work that we do to make sure that there's an affordable place for every Massachusetts family and senior household. You've heard a lot already about the housing shortage in the Commonwealth, so I will skip that part of my written testimony, but I will say that at POA we see that shortage in our wait list for our properties, where the across all of our properties, there are more than 3,000 people waiting for an affordable housing unit. If you average that across all of our properties in Massachusetts, that's a 7-year wait for an affordable unit. So that gives us a sense of the demand. And the result of that is that Massachusetts renters are uniformly paying more than they can afford for housing. So 80% of households below 50% of median income are paying more than they can afford for housing, and 75% of households between 50 and 80 of AMI are paying more than they can afford. So it's a fairly uniform problem among that population that 40B serves. POA's experience with 40B has been that when you combine 40B with the system that exists now for housing production plans and the 40R and 40T incentives, that these tools are being used effectively by towns that are planning proactively to permit appropriately scaled and designed housing developments at a manageable pace for their communities. We do a lot of work on Cape Cod, where the housing crisis is particularly severe, as you all know, to add affordable rental housing at appropriate scales using friendly 40Bs. For example, we're in construction now on the 3rd phase of a friendly 40B at Canal Bluffs in Bourne, where we worked closely with the town and the abutters to develop the kind of affordable housing they wanted for their community and their residents. We're also now working on the next of those properties in the town of Brewster to do a similar thing in Brewster on town-owned land using the friendly 40B process, which is an effective tool for them to produce the scale of housing that they want on that site. POA also does a lot of acquisition and renovation of existing affordable housing across Massachusetts. And just to wrap up quickly, the last couple of years we've preserved 2 developments originally built using 40B, and our experience is that once those properties become a part of a community, they become essential assets, and the towns in all of these cases are eager for us to preserve and renovate and extend affordability, that these become assets to their neighborhoods and to their communities. Thank you again.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could just make a brief comment, I just want to go on record in strong support for 40B and would agree with the recent speakers that we really do need to preserve and protect 40B. And, the perspective from the district that I represent, Cambridge and Somerville, is that we're making extraordinary efforts to continue with housing production. If you look at places like North Point, Kendall Square, Central Square, Union Square, Assembly Square, in our district we are seeing thousands upon thousands of new units zoned, permitted, brought online. And then when you get right beyond the urban core, what we so often find are communities that often are connected, sometimes to subway, often connected to the commuter rail, often connected to bus service, and in any given year, you're apt to find 0 new multifamily housing units produced. And so I certainly think that the planning elements of 40B ought to be emphasized. It's really a tool that communities ought to work with, but there's no question we're facing a housing emergency, and we certainly, I would not want to see us in any way lower our ambitions with 40B, and of course ultimately zoning and housing production legislation that this committee's already reported could help as well. So just wanted to add that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any further comments?
Where was the 4-unit 40B? Where was that?
That's in Hamilton. If you've ever been to the Weather Vane Tavern, which I would recommend, it's right next door. Oh, no, it's a small 4-unit rental deal with a commercial space on the 1st floor, and it's about a block from the commuter rail. Yes.
Thank you. We'll take Next, we'll take testimony from the home builders, including Benjamin Fierro and John Small.
Good afternoon, Senator Boncory, Representative Honan, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Ben Fierro. I'm an attorney and registered lobbyist on behalf of the Home Builders and Remodelers Association of Massachusetts. And I'm here to testify on behalf of the organization in strong support of Chapter 40B. No surprise. Joining me today is Attorney John Smolak from North Andover, who, by the way, is here as a volunteer, and who has represented developers and has worked on conventional developments, 40R developments, 40B developments, mixed-use developments, and has a great deal of expertise. And he will give you an illustration of the practical reality of Chapter 40B. Let me just say some preliminary comments, which is first that, as this committee knows, Chapter 40B was enacted in 1969. It was largely a result of the civil rights movement. It was largely to address discriminatory housing practices, largely in suburban communities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and part of the general move regarding Fair Housing Act, and later, as we saw, the Americans with Disabilities Act to address discrimination in a variety of forums. So folks say, well, the law's been on the books for 48 years, it's time to, it's never been amended, we need to change it. I would point out to this committee that I personally have been involved in substantial rewriting of the 40B regulations by the Department of Housing and Community Development under Governor Swift, Governor Romney, and again under Governor Patrick. Those changes in those regulations, substantial revision to them, were largely in response to concerns that communities had finding it difficult to work with and address Chapter 40B. And I can tell you, as someone who is involved in this as a volunteer in my community, I'm the vice chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals in the town of Ipswich. I'm the former chairman of the Master Plan Commission. Those changes in the regulations gave us important tools so that projects would be the best possible project from the developer and from the aspect of the community. But let me add this. Chapter 40B, we've talked a lot about the affordable housing component. And as you know, at least 20% of the units, sometimes 25% of the units, must be set aside for individuals and families not earning more than 80% of area median income. What we don't talk enough about is the importance of Chapter 40B to develop that other 80%, of market rate units. The reality is it is extremely difficult to build housing in most of our suburban and rural communities in Massachusetts. Children seem to be toxic these days. Communities don't want children. If they want housing, they want, senior housing. They've engaged in exclusionary housing practices and zoning, which we refer to as vasectomy zoning, an effort to, through their zoning, keep out children. And that is a reality. And how do they do that? They do that not just, Mr. Chairman, I can, let me just, for me. Yes, it is, Mr. Chairman. You know my advocacy. They do that not only through, obviously, through the zoning, through large lot zoning and so on, but they also do it through other local regulations, such as local wetlands regulations, local Title V septic system regulations, which are adopted as land use tools. And if any of you have served on your local planning board, local ZBA and so on, you know this. You know that a local Board of Health can adopt changes to local septic regulations exceeding the state regulations with no evidence, nothing to back up those changes. Same thing with local wetlands regulations. They can be adopted without any science behind them. They are often used to stop development. Chapter 40B enables us to build, enables home builders to build housing, and not just multifamily, and I will wrap up, Mr. Chairman, but importantly, single-family housing that's affordable to young families. Affordable to young families. In my town of Ipswich, we used to have zoning that allowed for quarter-acre lots. Today, we have a 2-acre minimum lot size. A home builder cannot build a home affordable to a young family looking to buy their first home. You want an $800,000 house? Terrific. Come to Ipswich, you're going to find it on 2 acres. You're looking for a $400,000 house on a quarter-acre lot, half-acre lot, or less, you're not going to find it. That's one of the reasons we need Chapter 40B. I'd be delighted to meet with each and every member of the committee to discuss these issues in greater length. And now, Mr. Chairman, if I might turn that to Attorney Smolak. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Again, my name is John Smolak, and appreciate the opportunity to testify here this morning. By way of background, as Bennett indicated, I've been a practicing land use attorney for the past 25 years. During this time, I've represented developers, both large and small, for-profit, non-profit developers in over 100 cities and towns across the Commonwealth.
During this time, I've been involved in about the permitting of approximately a little over 3,000 units of housing, the most of which has been through the Chapter 40B process. And so, for example, currently I'm involved in a number of 40B projects, including in cities and towns of Norfolk, Rentham, Upton, Milford, Medfield, Situate, Arlington, Ipswich, Haverhill, Draycote, Methuen, Peabody, and Gloucester, all of which have a significant need for affordable housing. And while many of the folks here have, or that you'll hear today, have been focusing on the negatives of Chapter 40B, I'm here today to tell you that Chapter 40B can be a truly effective land use planning tool when one works in collaboration with a municipal planning office or with the selectmen and others within a town. And for example, I represented a developer within the town of Rentham on a project that was started back in 2005. That project had the full cooperation with of the town, but even when there's full cooperation, there are certain things that happen along the way. But in this circumstance, the developer had a 150-acre parcel of land, and the end result was the development of a clustered project of 63 acres of that 150-acre parcel, which included over 200 units, including approximately 140 units of single-family detached housing under Chapter 40B. And this was a circumstance where you had a need to use 40B in the circumstance because the property crossed 3 separate zoning districts. There were 2 residential districts and a commercial district. But the developer in this case collaborated with the town and the planning staff and developed a truly evolving type of project that fit the town's needs. And again, as I indicated, the project was a clustered project. It preserved about 63 acres of open space, and the developer was able to create over 200 units of housing in that circumstance. So by using Chapter 40B as a planning tool, we preserved open space, created cluster zoning with density at around quarter-acre lots, the equivalent to that. And we produced housing, market rate housing that was in the $400,000 range, and also affordable housing that was between $180,000 to $200,000 per unit on the affordable housing range. I was going to talk, I guess my time is short, I was going to talk and address the comments of Representative Dooley in terms of the town of Norfolk. I actually represent the developer of 3 of those 7 affordable housing projects there. And that was a process that involved, before the filing of the application, involved the process of working with the town, with the technical review staff for a year and a half before we even filed. And so we were able to work out an arrangement where we were able to, the density was reduced from 300 units to approximately 220 units. We clustered the development on 53 acres out of 200 acres. In that circumstance, we're proposing to dedicate 140 acres for a new town water supply. And also that project was the benefit of a Mass Works grant, which is going to provide for needed infrastructure in the town. And this is a town where the school enrollment has declined, like many schools in the Commonwealth, has declined by about 10 to 15% over the past 10 years. So we don't think there's a school issue in that circumstance. But the bottom line is Chapter 40B can be a very effective tool. In the city of Haverhill, we've developed 2 projects involving veterans housing of 27 units and 44 units using the Chapter 40B as the tool. In downtown Gloucester, we've developed a 30-unit project with North Shore Community Development Corporation, Community Development Coalition. Again, using the Chapter 40B process. In North Andover, we developed a 42-unit rental project out of an abandoned nursing home facility. So Chapter 40B can be a very effective tool. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee?
One quick question. You mentioned veterans housing. You folks, you can do that?
Well, yes, we use the low-income housing tax credit.
Well, rather than take the time to
Sure.
get in touch with you afterwards, because one of my communities was told they couldn't do that. So I'll get direct, put my house and get in touch with you. Thank
Sure,
you.
happy to. Thank you.
Any further comments, questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll take testimony of Elizabeth Thayer. Jewish community housing available.
Hello. Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. So you've heard a lot of compelling testimony already about the important tools that 40B provides. And so I want to talk about, in particular, why it's so important for seniors, and particularly our low and moderate income seniors in Massachusetts. Largely because addressing loneliness is probably the most important thing we can do to support our seniors. And using community-based housing and housing built at scale, which 40B absolutely supports, is probably the best way to address loneliness because we're creating community opportunities. But it's also one of the best ways to address the affordability crisis, which our seniors are also facing, both by creating more affordable units in community-based settings for seniors, but also creating a really important delivery platform for the services that are so important to keep seniors connected and healthy and outside their apartments, but also outside of nursing homes, which come at a great cost to the state. So let me just share a couple of statistics, and then I actually want to go also to talking about middle-income seniors. Of course, the platform for affordable housing for extremely low-income seniors is important as well, but we have a crisis looming for our middle-income seniors, and 40B is an incredibly important tool to address that. So let me just first share that Jewish Community Housing is a nonprofit organization. We house 1,500 extremely low-income seniors in the greater Boston area. A third of our residents are over 85. Our average income is $13,000 a year, and we have a wait list of over 1,700 people, which means that you're going to be on the wait list for at least 3, probably 5 to 10 years, which means that you're not going to outlive the amount of time that you're on our wait list. So for the affordable housing need, it's absolutely clear that producing more housing and quickly using the tool of 40B is essential for our poor seniors. But increasingly, as I said, we have a baby boom generation that is growing at a very rapid pace. By 2050, we are going to triple the population of people living over the age of 90, and 2/3 of those people are going to need housing that is accessible with access to affordable supports. Right now in Massachusetts, our seniors experience the greatest shortfall in the nation between income and cost of living, and that is largely driven by our high cost of housing, which we can only address by increasing the supply. Right now, 53% of Massachusetts seniors pay more than they can afford for housing using a traditional measure, and the average cost wow, that goes fast. Thank you, and let me just end by saying that there is a way developing housing at scale and bringing services to seniors affordably will help to solve this problem for our moderate income seniors, and 40B is the tool to help make that happen. So thank you very much.
Questions before you go to the committee? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the record, we will receive some written testimony prior to the hearing. If any of those who submitted that would like to testify at this point, we'll call you up or give you that opportunity. Tamara Small, Patricia Bomber, and Mike McDonald. So next we'll take the testimony of Justine Kent.
Eurotem. It's unique. My husband was a refugee from Estonia, so there are very few Eurotams. I'm executive director of a regional land trust called Upper Charles Conservation Land Trust. We serve 9 cities and towns in the Metro West area, ranging from on the lower income side, Milford, and to the upper income side, Dover, Medfield, Medway, Holliston, Hopkinton, Natick, Sherburne. I'm probably forgetting somebody, and that's about it. Any rate, all told, we have a population of about 125,000 people in all those towns. None of those towns are on the MWRA water system. At our board meetings, which occur every month, we talk nothing but about water and the number of 40B developments in our towns. So I would encourage you all to definitely build more affordable housing, but build it that's currently served by the MWRA water system that supplies approximately 65% of Massachusetts residents with water. The rest of us are not on the MWRA water system. And when we have large-scale developments of 200 units, 400 units, even 100 units, somehow we have to find the water. The water, ever since the drought of 2016, has become a major issue. Those towns that are on private wells exclusively are now finding wells going down 600, 800, 1,100, 1,300 feet to get enough flow of water to supply just a single-family home, let alone a multifamily housing situation. Now, those towns that I referenced that are not on MWRA, who are lucky enough to have municipal water supplies, they also are finding their municipal water supplies taxed. So unless we all get on the MWRA system, we've got a real problem where we have water scarcity, and there is scarcity of water, as I believe the Board of Health behind me will eventually testify. Whether people want to recognize it or not, the Quabbin Reservoir reserves are going this direction for a variety of reasons. More towns like Cambridge getting 20% of your water. I know Ipswich has a major water problem. I was talking to the representative from Milford about Echo Lake and the Milford Water Company. This is all over. Last but not, boy, this does go fast. The other thing I was going to say is please do not sacrifice, but water's the main concern, but the ancillary concern is recreation. I've lived in Boston, I've lived in Cambridge, I have lived in Newton, and I have lived in Dover. In all of those towns, I went west. I don't own a second house, okay? And yes, I'll get, it sounds like my husband's alarm system in the morning. All those towns that I referenced in the inner city, frankly, use our towns to recreate. Whether it's our building of bike paths, and you can look on our website, the Upper Charles Trail that goes from Milford, Holliston, Hopkinton, Sherburne, or whether it's the farm at Powysset Farm in Dover, whether it's Natick passing the Pegan Hill thing, we get inundated, especially on weekends, which I think is great, by people from the city wanting open space. So I please say, build affordable housing, but make sure you've got the infrastructure to place it appropriately. Okay? Thank you very much.
Before you have questions from the committee?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. There seems to be none. So
Thank you.
Next, we'll take testimony from Joe Clark, the town of Dover Board of Health.
I'm the guilty party for supplying some of these numbers. I'd like to start out by objecting to some of the generalized comments that were made earlier today. I grew up at 67 Cheney Street in Roxbury. Some of you know where that is. I lived in veterans housing. I lived in housing provided by the Federal Housing and Urban Development Act of 1965. I am sensitive to the need for lower income housing. And I reject any claim that a town, at least my town, goes out of its way to prevent 40B. We do not use exclusionary zoning. Our Title V enforcement is what the state mandates, no more. And in some cases, I have signed permits knowing that I thought the system was at risk, but it improved the opportunity for housing. Having said that, of the 16 square miles of Dover, half of that land is unusable for housing. 4 square miles are held by the Corps of Engineers, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, the trustees, by Hale Reservation. As to use of it for passive recreation or active recreation, every spring I sign permits for summer camps where children from Dorchester and Roxbury come out to the fields which we have, which are developable. They are not protected by conservation restrictions. They are at risk. Now, as to the issue of water, I have submitted some written testimony to you. I hope you have received it. I have additional copies. I attend the monthly Massachusetts Water Resource Commission meetings. I hope some of you are aware of it. A year ago, I started giving them statistics. Some of the members are appreciative. The MWRA members are not appreciative. This is what's happening to the Quabbin. I hope you can see it. It's happening because we are having less rain, less precipitation. If you look at recent reports internally that I have access to from NOAA, we can expect more. We'll have more incidents of heavy precipitation that run off, and then we'll have periods of more drought. That's what NOAA is telling us. And the problem we face is as more and more people move into the city of Boston, into those expensive housing or other housing, as the suburban communities, they're all on the MWRA. 65% of the Commonwealth's are on the MWRA. 90% of the Commonwealth are on public water supply systems. Dover hasn't a single one. In Dover, you live or die off of your private water well. And you live or die off of your private septic system. I had to introduce a specific bylaw this year because one of our 40Bs that I can't control has adulterated the wells of the adjoining properties. So each of the householders has to pay anywhere between $12,000 to $18,000 to put in reverse osmosis systems and then maintain them. We don't have any ability to deal with that. So, the document I provided you deals with the following. Not all communities are the same. You can't generalize. Dover, I'll tell you, you think of Dover in terms of income. My income is substantially less than the average income in Dover, okay? I'm a retired firefighter. Also taught at BU for many years. Taught health statistics. I worry about these. I worry about water. I worry about septage. We are looking at a crisis that's coming. If you come to the Water Resource Commission meetings, you'll hear it. We have no ability to restrict water consumption. Most of you are on the MWRA. How many of you actually reduced your water consumption in 2016? I'll bet you almost none of you did. So that's the problem we face, infrastructure. We don't have water. We don't have sewer. We're the only town east of Worcester that has no state road. Our roads are single lane, and in some cases, one lane. You go one way, and then you wait for the guy to go the other way. And yet, we're being told to be treated as if we were the city of Cambridge, and we have all this infrastructure. We don't. Now try and work with that. When a 40B developer comes in and wants to put in housing in an area where you know that there's going to be problems with the sewerage moving into existing water wells. We've lost streams. The USGS has documented the loss of groundwater, has documented the loss of water. And we are, in fact, a major tributary to the Charles River. So if you deplete our water one of these years,
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Clark, we just asked if you could send that to the committee in PDF.
Absolutely. I'll give you each of the chairs copies, but I will tell you that this morning I sent to each one of your email addresses.
MIT background?
Yes, I was on the faculty at MIT, and I was many years on the faculty at Boston University, and my lapel pin, unlike yours, says I was in the fire service.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next we'll hear from Councilman Garrett. Mr. Garrett. Oh, I'm sorry, Rebecca Honeywell, if you want to join as a panel, you guys hand up.
Yes, we're from Sherburne. Hello, my name is Carol McGarry. I'm a lifelong resident of Massachusetts and have lived in Sherburne for the past 24 years. I'm also a member of the town's Conservation Commission. I'm here to comment on Senate Act 748. Living in a town like Sherburne, which relies entirely on private wells and septics, is a very different choice than most people make in the Boston area. In Sherburne and in 11 other Massachusetts towns like it, we don't get clean drinking water from the Quabbin or another public water supply. My water for drinking and bathing comes from the ground on my 2-acre property. Its purity depends on the quality of the water that sinks down through the earth from the rain falling on roads, lawns, and woodlands around my property, as well as what comes from my own and my neighbors' septic systems. Like many people in town, I avoid using toxic chemicals for one simple reason. Those chemicals will go from my septic leaching field into the groundwater and eventually into my neighbor's well or my own. Therefore, it was with alarm that I watched the plans for a 40B development in Sherburne that relies on multiple private wells on the same property as a septic system for multiple units. The estimated nitrate loading at the project is predicted to be 7 times the level mandated by state Safe Drinking Water Act standards. How can this happen? Chapter 40B rules did not anticipate large developments in communities like Sherburne that rely on private wells and private septic. Under the current rules, a developer can use private wells in a large condo development as long as each well serves less than 25 individuals. Since each well is considered a private water supply, it's not subject to the statewide standards that ensure clean drinking water as a public water supply would. This might not be a problem if the developer were careful about treating septic effluent, but in fact, if a developer builds a project that emits less than 10,000 gallons per day of wastewater, he can use a septic system instead of a more heavily regulated and more efficient wastewater treatment plant. And the septic system can emit the high levels of nitrates that I mentioned. In the development in Sherburne, the septic leaching fields are directly upgradient of the wells, and thus pose a significant threat of future contamination as nitrates move through the ground. Imagine if you flushed your toilet and the liquid could end up in your drinking water. That's the situation for the low-income residents who are going to be living in this 40B development in Sherburne. Without the necessity to meet safe drinking water standards or nitrate loading limits, Chapter 40B currently puts low-income residents at risk of contaminated waters in communities like Sherburne that rely on private wells and private septic. Every resident of Massachusetts deserves clean water, regardless of their income level. I urge you to close this loophole in the Chapter 40B regulations in order to protect the health and welfare of low-income residents by supporting Senate Act 748 and recognizing the special conditions that are present in towns like Sherburne and other towns that rely on private water and septic. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Rebecca O'Sullivan Honeywell, and I'm a volunteer on the Board of Health in Sherburne. The main bill I'm here to protect is 748, but I also support the water resources bills that are being discussed today as well. As 748 was intended to protect the water supply where public water supplies do not exist. Simply is to require the same standards for all water supplies in all communities. The irony is that 98% of wells in Massachusetts have public water supplies which are monitored and regulated by DEP, and those communities are required to ensure that the water supply meets those DEP standards for nitrogen loading, etc. There are a lot of other considerations. Unfortunately, a loophole is created in a private water system. So any private well is not protected by the Clean Drinking Water protection laws. Fresh Drinking Water Act protects the sources of water supply in the ground, and the Safe Drinking Water Act specifically applies to the water source, so the Quabbin Reservoir or the well, but private property has no statutory protection. Coincidentally, I'm interrupting my sentence, we actually last week got a call from another resident who is next door to another project by the same developer, and suddenly her water is black and foamy. She has extraordinarily high levels of manganese. She's lived in town for 35 years. She's a single mother, music teacher who has very limited resources, and she was told by the developer that couldn't possibly prove that it had anything to do with him. And now we had to tell her it was a civil matter between two private property owners. So monitoring and design phase consideration of protecting the quality of the drinking water is important for all residents in Massachusetts. And this is where the absence of this in the comprehensive permit application process, or whatever you call it, in the very, very beginning phase, is essential, and it's possible that perhaps it was overlooked, or maybe the situation never arose. But there are only 12 towns where this 748 will actually apply. So monitoring to ensure safe drinking water in all systems would be limited to only 4 towns in the northeast region of Massachusetts. 5 are on Cape Cod, and the remaining are in western Massachusetts. However, in Flint, Michigan, as we all know, because it was a public water system, it was protected by law. That doesn't happen in Sherburne. As a physician and patient advocate for more than 26 years, I'm concerned about the drinking water in the similar project that Carol McGarry mentioned, where the threshold was 7 times what DEP would require for safety. That endangers not only babies and pregnant women, but elderly and many other individuals as well. So please support S748 to protect the drinking water in all systems, to avoid health problems, to prevent liability, and also to minimize financial burdens on individual residents who might not have the resources to look out for their own interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Dan? Okay. Representative?
Thank you. So, in some communities that have a similar problem with no public drinking water and everyone's relying on wells, in a 40B situation, what they do is that the town requires a packaged sewage treatment plant for that development. And that has no harmful effect on the
Except
groundwater.
those nitrogen loading numbers that were estimated by 3 independent hydrologists had the same. The town hydrologist, the developer's hydrologist, and a group of abutters who got together and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars out of their own collective funds, all had similar numbers. Their interpretations were what differed. And the problem was that the design included 5 wells, each serving 24 individuals. Because they were serving 24, they were just under the threshold. And then what we use to estimate those numbers, how do you determine how big a septic system should be? How do you know how big the leaching area should be for a particular agent? So there, somewhere along the way, smart people established that the politically correct unit to use is a bedroom.
It's interesting. In my home community, we have a 250-unit development underway now, 40B basically, and we're using it as a treatment plant, and it's not that far from the town limits. So, and I assure you, there's a lot of science involved to see that we're not jeopardizing it.
Well,
So-
you might have your water, drinking water coming in from from another location, like Quabbin or MWRA.
All the water comes from our own town wells.
Okay, well, I don't know. So this is the problem. There's another loophole. There's no statutory protection. Second
What is
is the DEP reserves the right to determine whether something is a private water supply or public. So there's one project that just went through that we, the Board of Health, felt should be monitored because of what we knew was in the water. But DEP determined that it was a private water system, so they're not being monitored. And that has been built, and we were just interfering with progress, and how could we be so insensitive? And we were really trying to look out for the drinking water quality. To qualify for, all the calculations are low, right? They're just under the threshold, but that doesn't involve monitoring. That's the initial calculations. What happened in Flint, Michigan, for example, I'm just using that because it's an easy example. The monitoring is what identified the problem. In the towns that have private water systems, there's no mandated monitoring, and there's no way of knowing. But we all know that there's nowhere for the sewage to go. There's no way that our town wouldn't be completely filled with development if it weren't 40% wetlands. And the problem is that there's nowhere for the sewage to go. And you're drinking the water right next to the sewer, but you don't have to test it, and not everybody tests it. And that particular project had extraordinarily high nitrogen loading estimates, which, nitrogen toxicity, examples of nitrogen toxicity include altitude sickness, blue baby syndrome. They're silent. Lots of people have heart disease, other comorbidities like lung diseases, and the nitrogen binds the red blood cell and you don't get the oxygen you need. No one will know that it's the well water that made you sick, and somebody would need to actually have a threshold, like some kind of a suspicion to even look for it. And then the problem is the toxicity's been achieved, and then it's too late. So there was no backup plan because there's no monitoring in place. So all this says is, let's put our town into the same playing field as everybody else. They're being regulated by DEP. They're being monitored, and they have to show that their water is clean. Unfortunately, nobody has to test the water in this particular development. It's a smaller scale development, but it doesn't mean that the water is clean. In the 40B project, we're hoping that DEP will decide that particular project needs to be monitored, because then it's not my problem anymore. That they can, because I don't think that people fight with DEP, but they definitely fight with the local boards, and there's a lot of
Thank you.
And this particular development, by the way, is not a huge development. It's it's almost like a cluster neighborhood. And so that's why they just had septic and wells. But it sounds very similar to the situation in Dover, where they're seeing the nitrate plume. And, one of the problems with the private wells, like she said, is they're not, I don't even have to test my well at all if I don't want to, right? Once you have a private well, there's no mandated testing whatsoever. And there's even a kind of contrarian thing where people don't want to find out there's contaminants in the wells, because then the value of the real estate goes down. Or you have to drill another well, which is very expensive. And if you're in the middle of a toxic plume, you can't drill another well. Then you have to remediate with reverse osmosis systems, which are extremely wasteful of water. So most people don't do that as a whole house system. So if you have manganese in your system, you're probably not going to, then maybe you'd have to do a whole house system. But it's a mess. I mean, in a town like Sherburne, if your personal groundwater is fouled, you're really in a bad situation. And we were both very concerned about this particular development, because we really think that the residents will have no idea, and unless the condo development mandates their own annual testing, and even if they do and they find something wrong, the developer's long gone, So now they are bearing the cost of something that they probably didn't even anticipate when they moved in. So for the people who are paying full market rate, you might say, well, okay, maybe they can afford to do that. But for the low-income residents, they're also bearing that cost at some point in the future, not to mention these kind of hidden health costs that most people aren't even aware of. If somebody had told me that nitrates could have been, could be the cause of problems for my son when he was a baby, it would have been a complete surprise to me. So I think it's a public education issue. It's because there's so few towns that are on private wells and septic. I have to believe that the 40B, original regulation didn't anticipate it, and then we're within this area in the Metro West area that's now experienced the pressures of development. So it was interesting to hear from Dover that their pressure is just water disappearing. And by the way, on my well, for sure, we were thinking we'd have to drill a new well in the last few years. So groundwater levels are going down in these towns, and we don't have an alternative. I mean, in Sherburne, there is no aquifer where we can drill a public well. We're now considering a public well in the middle of a wetlands near the center of town. But there is no place for it to be built, and there's the infrastructure to create that in town would be enormously expensive. So there's just so many constraints, and it comes down to, the individual homeowner have to do their best to keep the groundwater clean and, protected and collectively protected. But as we said, Rebecca really, as a doctor, was the one who recognized what the real public health risk here is, and that it could be pretty, easily, that loophole could be closed. It's not, and it would only impact a relatively small number of towns, but it could impact a lot of people, and it could impact lives. And I think that's where we felt, we're not lobbyists, we're just members of commissions in our town, but we really felt it was important to come up to the state and talk to you about
I
it.
personally think that it's good to encourage affordable housing, and I just want to make sure that those future residents have safe drinking water, and I wish there was a way to have more affordable housing, but we still need to protect the drinking water.
Because there's another very, very large 40B development that's been proposed. There's another one, there's several. And then the one that's coming online, which is a mile from where I live, I would never buy a unit there. I would never do that. So as it currently, has been permitted. So that's a problem. There's a problem.
Any further questions, comments? Thank you both very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll take testimony of Maureen Meister from the Winchester Planning Board.
You still say good morning, almost. And Heather Von Meering is joining me. She won't speak. She wasn't planning to, but we both are. I want to make this really clear. We're elected. Maureen Meister, Heather Von Meering, elected to the Winchester Planning Board. We are citizen representatives. We are not paid to be here. We are not representing other organizations. We're simply here out of our respect for our community and wanting to report to you our experience in Winchester. The Winchester Planning Board, a 5-member elected board, supports House Bill 657 and 658. Those are bills sponsored by Representative Michael Day relating to Massachusetts Chapter 40B. Massachusetts cities and towns, as we are hearing this morning, are widely varying in terms of their housing stock and how they have developed. The town of Winchester has been intensively developed, first during the late 19th century, and then in the years after World War II. The population of the town today is a little over 21,000. The residents are living in about 6 square miles. The town has 5,648 detached houses, 712 duplex units, and 1,300 units in apartment-style or similar buildings. Advocates of affordable housing will appreciate the fact that Winchester offers a wide variety of sizes and types of residences, including small Victorian houses, post-war capes and ranches, and the 1,300-plus units in multi-unit buildings. What Winchester doesn't have are very many state-designated affordable units recognized under Chapter 40B. Today, Winchester is built out. Open parcels that remain are located on steep rock outcroppings, have major drainage issues, or lack reasonable street frontage. Where 40B projects are being proposed is on land that is undeveloped for good reason. In the meantime, the Planning Board is concerned about the way the town has been hit with teardowns. Since the year 2000, we began tracking the numbers and photographing the houses that are being demolished. We have pictures. We have lost almost 250 such dwellings. These are the houses for young families, town employees, and seniors seeking to downsize. New state legislation, including incentives, are needed for communities such as ours to encourage town meetings to pass bylaws that will encourage the survival of these houses. In mature suburbs such as Winchester, the land is nowhere to be found to build comparable housing. Just doesn't exist. We can look at a map together. We will look, we will see the Middlesex Dells, we will see existing neighborhoods, we will see the town center. We won't find places for new small houses. On the other hand, denser development in our town center holds promise. Recently, Winchester Town Meeting rezoned the center to legalize mixed-use development. The zoning includes an inclusionary housing provision and requirements. Yet even if several hundred units are built, the town will not get close to reaching the 10% goal of affordable units in our community as mandated by Chapter 40B. As we've been hearing today, Massachusetts needs new laws to respond to where we are now. Laws are needed that respect the many virtues of the existing housing in older, more densely built communities such as ours. In promoting affordable housing, the state needs to recognize the different development patterns in the cities and towns of the Commonwealth. Thank you very much. I'd be glad to take questions.
Questions or comments from the committee?
Just point out, Mr. Chair, this seems to be a recurring theme in the suburbs that 401, 4B is a cookie cutter and it doesn't fit outside of an MWA area. I never thought of that, but that is a good demarcation.
Yeah.
That's exactly
right. I just want to say, we did pass this new zoning in our town center. We're okay. I mean, we like the smaller units, the variety units, but we're losing the small houses. That's something, we need your help. We want to go into town meeting and say, here's a bylaw that'll help us keep these houses, because we're never going to get them back. So I think we could use some help from you in revising 40B, amending it would be a great step. Thank you very much.
John LeBeau, testified Representative Kane and Senator Moore. So next we will hear from Lucille Dodson, concerning citizens of Wareham. And David Kirk, if you want to join her as well, from the Wareham Finance Committee.
Would you like to go first, or would you like me to?
Would you like?
Well, I'll start.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of our committee here. We really appreciate it. We've heard some very eloquent speeches from people who have been in favor of 40B, the way it runs right now. We've also heard some very sad stories from other people in other towns. And I'd like to give you a little bit of small town experience. From a small town of Wareham, we believe that 40B needs to be changed. It was fine 60 years ago, but things have changed since then. Wareham's a community of some 21,000 people. If you look at the SHI housing index that's on the state website, you find that we have something like 9,880 year-round residences in town. We have SHI units of 746, which gives us about 7.7%. No, we don't meet that. But we also have other things. We have 10 group homes. We have Habitat for Humanity. We've made an effort to accommodate people who need housing. In fact, in town, according to the latest from the Wareham Board of Health, we have 1,289 housing units that are being rented. That's one or maybe even two. And we have 640 units in large developments, which range from 24 to 164 units. Right now, in front of the State House, we have another development which is 40B coming up. And that one just happens to be, well, they just increased it. It was 174 units, which came out to something like 330 bedrooms. That's a big impact on the town. How big an impact? I was listening to the town of Ipswich and the developer who was building there, and he was saying how great it was that his 40B gave, what, 30 acres back to the town as conservation land. The Dexter property, with over 300 units, is scheduled to be built on less than 9 acres. Less than 9. It's terrible. Wareham, and then we heard someone else who said, you know, people with $400,000 budgets for houses can't move in anymore. Well, Wareham has 3,547 homes, house and property, that are valued at less than $200,000. If you can't get affordable for that, we also have 1,100 trailers, mobile homes, or manufactured homes in town that are not considered affordable under 40B. The laws has to be changed. And one of the ways to do it would be to go and say, all right, the manufactured homes, they're affordable. What are we trying to do? We're trying to give people a place to live. And that has to be changed. Another thing that a number of people have pointed out is the support that's available within the town for the people who are coming in. 330 bedrooms on 74 unit development is going to have a tremendous impact. Right now, our sewer system is overwhelmed. We're putting in $10 million into the water systems in town. We're in the process of developing and coming before the state of Massachusetts for a new elementary school, which is probably going to be $60 or $70 million. And that doesn't include that 330 bedrooms. The other thing is, people are going to move in here, there aren't any jobs. To go from Wareham to Boston, I drove it this morning. It's a 2-hour drive, and that wasn't during rush hour. That was after rush hour. We don't have trains, we have few buses that go back and forth. There aren't any jobs. You have to look at where you're putting these houses and why you're putting them there so people can work. And that you get people from the community, the firemen in town, who can afford to rent a house. You know, the new 40B or new state laws for what, a 4-bedroom in 2018 is something like $2,600. You're pricing the local guys out. So I really urge you to consider modifying the laws and take advantage of the affordable housing that's out there right now. Thank you very much.
Well, in 1 minute it'll be afternoon, so almost afternoon, Chair and Committee. I'm not part of the Finance Committee in our town of Wareham. I'm just a local citizen who lives there, and I'm not a part of any organization, but I am part of a group of concerned citizens for our town. As David stated, our town is about 21,000 people year-round, and the town of Wareham, first of all, I am asking for your support today to pass the bills 2241 and 2242. And the reason for these is that in our town, for an example, is we've got, it's a community where it's like you're one of your last affordable communities where a young family can come in to buy a single family home and try to raise their children there, which is great. And I pride in that. Our community also has helped, and we have several already multi-use 40Bs in our community. We also have, as you mentioned before, the veterans. We just recently have had, and it's up and moving right now, the veterans home, and or housing, I should say.
Father Bills.
And we have all kinds of wonderful multifamilies, units of under affordable Bs. We've had struggles with that too. We have had an increase in town over crime. We've had the financial hardship. Our community is mixed mostly with fixed income people or people that are, elderly, that are struggling trying to maintain their own home. I'm one of them. I'm a single woman. I own my own home. I see my sewer bill go up. I see we just voted for a lower scale of a new fire house because we don't have the funds. We can't afford to just keep going. The new fire station that we just approved doesn't even include if this 40B that David's talking about, which was proposed initially at 176 units, now the developer's trying to push that to 220. And this would be in the district of this firehouse, which again, the economic disaster in our town, these need to be changed. We have 18 mobile home communities in our community, and they are family friendly. So if the law could change to have those manufactured homes to include into our community as affordable housing, we would be well over the 10%. It is, what's going to happen is if 40Bs keep coming into our community, the people that already exist living there that are struggling from paycheck to paycheck, soon we will be knocking on doors looking for affordable houses because we will have to be selling our homes because we cannot afford our own bills anymore. And that is why I'm here. I'm passionate about the quality of the life of the people that currently live in there. We're not heartless. We do have affordable housing in our town, and we have several of them. So we just cannot keep taking on this financial burden to our town, and our sewer capacity is at current level. It's at its capacity right now, not including any further large developments that happen to our town. So I urge you to please support those bills, and they are 2241 and 2242, and thank you very much.
May I just have one item? And the other thing is that if those bills are supported and the modular homes become considered affordable, the owners of those homes can be eligible for community block grants also to make improvements to their homes.
I have a list of the benefits that would, if you would care to read those, of what those benefits, if the manufactured housing in our own community would help people on fixed incomes that own a mobile home that say need a new roof or need a new furnace, but they really don't have the means for that. They could go to our town and qualify for, like David said, a community grant money that would become available. So there's so many benefits. It's a win-win. It's not a loss. It's a win-win.
Any questions? Any questions from the committee? Well, thank you both for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll hear from Kristen Balash and Rossi. If you want to join her.
We just met, so we did just meet. We weren't here together, but we certainly can testify together. I'm sure that's fine. Are you okay with that? That's fine?
Sure.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm here just as a resident of Norfolk. I recently moved there with my spouse and my 2-year-old daughter. Before that, I lived in Boston proper. So I feel like I have a very good sense of affordable housing needs in both the suburbs and the urban community in Massachusetts. My spouse and I both also work for nonprofits. And to be honest, it was very hard to even afford to get into Norfolk as it was. We both work in the city and commute to Norfolk, from Norfolk to Boston each day. If I ever thought that I'd be testifying against 40B, I wouldn't believe it myself. And I'm not. I am a huge supporter of affordable housing and of 40B and what it's trying to accomplish. It's very necessary to increase affordable housing units for people that need them in both urban and suburban areas. However, having lived in Norfolk for a few years now, I very much see the issues around town specifics and how they matter in this situation. I will say that for a town of 10,000 people, which Norfolk is, to meet our affordable housing threshold requires something like 400 units. We have, I think someone mentioned 7 40B projects coming into town right now, and we have very little we can do to affect what they're doing. I've heard today for the first time that there might be some things we can do, but no one's told us this before, and it's been years of us asking. The infrastructure in our town is not there right now. Can it be? Sure, but right now it's not. Half our town is on well water and septic. The other half has city, town water, but to add several hundred units, I don't know how that's getting paid for. I know a developer here said that he's kicking in some money. That's awesome. He's great. I think he's doing a lot of good work with our town right now, but he's one of several, and not all of them are. I know there's some bills on the agenda or some tweaks around how to have more of an effect on the developers and their agendas for profit. I really encourage you to look at that as a way to help us help ourselves here and have more that we can do with and to work with the developers. I will also say that I grew up myself in Section 8 housing, and so I know of its importance. And one of the only ways our town can get to the threshold is by high density units. And I don't think that is the right method. It is not the best living situation for low-income people. Our town is trying to buy, when parcels of land come up, our town is trying to buy them and turn them into single-family affordable units. What's actually happening is the developers see that as well, come in, offer more than the town can pay, and then build 40B developments. So we're trying our best. I'm seeing our folks try their best, and we're just not able to work with what's going on right now. I think that 40B should stay intact as much as it can, but any tweaks you guys can work with to help smaller towns would be really appreciated. So thank you.
Okay. My name is Josephine Kordahi. I moved to Norfolk from Quincy. I myself also lived in an affordable housing unit before I was able to rise above and complete nursing school and move on to nurse practitioner with my 8-year-old twin boys in tow and my 5-year-old niece. My husband and I now live in Norfolk. On the Article of 3010, I would like to expand the definition of 40B to allow greater access to housing for those who work civic jobs, work in the police force, teaching, and even social workers don't get paid decently on the pay scale. But particularly for people who serve in our communities, I think it's important for them because they have a greater stake in our community. This is also especially important because we are allowing access to 40B, we're not restricting it. Along with this, 40B has addressed affordable housing in its plight for, it is indeed honorable. However, in towns such as my town, Norfolk, they do not have we don't have abundant water. We don't have access to the MWRA. And no one's talked about gas lines. I think approximately 10% of the town has gas lines. Everything else is on propane. So among the 7 40B projects that are being proposed, they are looking into underground heating propane. That seems to be the only option for these vast projects that are coming to town. This leads the development to turn to non-conventional methods for heating, and I'm not sure, if safety issues are being addressed here. When you consider 40B and what it offers, you should also consider the town, their resources, their water, their safety, and any other cumbersome instructions, in town. We have a prison. We have a prison in Norfolk. We have the population that no one else wants. There's a prison in Concord. These are not being considered for smaller towns. A town is barely 11,000 people. We're overwhelmed with projects. 40B has become for profit. It was originally, was supposed to be for nonprofit. It is now for profit as apparent by the scope of housing projects we are getting and its density in size with relation to our character of our small town and what it has for resources. We have parcels that no one, ever wanted to buy or regular builders weren't able to purchase, and now 40Bs are buying them, and they're going to require blasting. We're going to have blasting in neighborhoods. We're going to have tons of gravel fill being brought in for the outside, and, having projects which would take between 5 and 8 years to complete with young school children on the side of the road. With these big ton trucks coming by. You have to consider the image of our town. Large ton trucks, tunneling through small, tiny, narrow roads with no sidewalks. Children, there's no place for children to be waiting for the bus. I'm just trying to give you an image of what we are looking at and what we are already going through now. what we can do better with 40B, we can improve it. I just want to improve 40B, to address the tight housing market issue while working with the town. We can work with the developers. We can, look at, we don't want our developers to be using our housing laws to circumvent them so that they can, create units that, could pose, a risk to our own limited resources as well. And, environmentally, if our limits, resources are depleted, a small town such as Norfolk will have nowhere to turn. We just won't have anywhere to turn. And I myself, also benefited from 40B. I am support 40B. I just think, if the state can support in towns less than 15,000, they have, already have, prisons, for example, that, have, depleted resources. If they could look at their budgets and see, or if some way they can provide a form or a way for them to work with developers so that we can create 40B projects in town that will fit in, with the character and our resources, so that we have projects that are 200, units, 300 units coming in. It's a lot. It's a lot in one place, and I don't think we have the resources. In fact, I know we don't have the resources. We don't have them.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions, comments from the committee? Thank you both for your testimony. The last person who signed up was Vincent Lawrence. I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Vincent Lawrence Dixon, residing at 60 Lake Street, Unit N, Winchester, Massachusetts, 01890. Additional contact information is available. I am a member of the Finance Committee of the Town of Winchester, though I'm not appearing on their behalf. For many years now, we as individuals and as a Commonwealth have faced many challenges regarding housing, and many solutions have been considered. Chapter 40B is a controversial law with laudable goals and some flawed details. Most every one of us who live in the municipalities of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts think about and of housing every single day with respect and affection. It's part of who we are. Ultimately, as we all struggle with the philosophies by which we live our lives in our Commonwealth, housing, health care, and employable skills training are three crucial factors by which life is decently possible and balanced, and ought to be recognized in our Massachusetts Constitution Declaration of Rights. While we are now largely a secular society, that does not mean that we have lost, nor should we abandon all moral compass. As Jesus said, the poor you will always have with you, and regardless of what we think of the role of Jesus in Western society, that truth is profound. According to the Gospel of Matthew, we are commended to think of all persons, and it is the so-called social gospel which has contributed to much of the remarkable progress of our Commonwealth and of our people, as well as inspired so many other Americans across our nation. Our communities are fragile and facing enormous challenges, and it is likely only by modest reforms and public actions to broaden a comprehensive range of approaches that we can improve the lives of our people and our families. S728, this particular proposal, seeks to respect the intent of Chapter 40B while making appropriate and relevant adjustments which are vital and needed. It makes clear that when it comes to housing, there are many needed ideas and potential contributing solution approaches, the orientation of them. The new and recently announced Metropolitan Mayors Coalition of Greater Boston is a group covering 14 local area municipalities, and it's an example of a coordinated approach. Two other examples are additional bills that I've filed separately, S86, an act for community housing packages, and S1141, an act to study establishment of and definition of a Middlesex Regional Commission. This particular bill, S728, reflects the general commitment of the overwhelming majority of the population of our time that housing in our lives must take into account environmental factors, neighborhood values, high quality and lasting construction standards, and important transit options, including regional transit options. A variety of and several bills are part of the bills at this hearing, and many have similar and overlapping intents. Briefly make note of them. H657 of Representative Day and numerous others, both Democratic and Republican, recommends the establishment of a commission on Chapter 40B, which I support, And S727 of my own Senator Lewis also recommends establishment of a commission with specified standards quite similar to those I have noted. So I think that we have a bipartisan consensus here in some important respects. Please consider my bill S728 as part of this emerging landscape of consensus. I believe that passing it now would reduce the pressures on these issues while a commission explores the broader and more detailed areas of concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee this time? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Nice to see some old familiar faces.
Is anyone who signed up to get called on? Now, anyone wishing to testify who hasn't been heard from? Please let it come up. Please state your name for the record.
Sure. Sorry, you ran out of sign-up sheets. My name's Tara Nolan. I'm on the Planning Board in Dover and the Open Space Committee. A lot of facts have been presented today. I don't have a lot new to add, so I won't take up your time. But I just want you to know the concern is real. You know, our town, I think, gets painted with the brush of snob zoning. But the concerns about health, the economic impact on existing residents is real. People are worried about their wells. They're worried about what will happen to their homes, to the town in general. And we just don't have a lot of other water resources. We are keenly aware of the lack of affordable housing, kind of in all, I would say, because I don't know what you officially call it, sort of mid-range housing. There's things that qualify as affordable, and there's just not a diversity of housing prices in town. We are trying to address that, but I just want everyone to know the interest is legit. We are concerned about having that, and the concerns are for water are a real challenge. And we have a lot of bright people devoting a lot of time, doing a lot of analysis. We're not just sort of making these rules to be difficult. We are struggling with trying to get more housing. So please understand that. I think you heard a lot of heartfelt stories from a lot of people here today. And try not to paint everybody with the broad brush of trying to avoid development. I think it has a lot of great benefits parochially for the people that live in our town that have a hard time meeting their bills and would like other housing alternatives, as well as the obvious benefits of having the town have a more diverse population, people with different means and from different areas. So we're trying. Thank you.
Okay, well, that is all. Any comments from the committee members at this time? No? Please raise your hand. Please raise your
Thank you.